Welcome to the PIO podcast, a place for all things public information related for police, fire, EMS, and local government. An open forum to learn, grow, and develop your public information skills. Your host, Robert Tornabene, is a public information officer with over 10 years in the field and 27 years of law enforcement background. In each episode, we will explore different aspects of the public information officer profession. Weekly, we will delve into the field of public information by talking to other PIOs. So sit back and enjoy this episode.
Good afternoon. We have Genevieve Judge. She's the Public Information Officer from the Sarasota Police Department. Genevieve, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Robert. I'm honored to be here.
So you are the Partnership in Policing Communications Coordinator and Media Relations Liaison for the Police Department, correct? Is that the right title?
That's correct. I actually switched it recently. We just got a new chief back in January. And so we switched my title from Partnership Policing Communications Coordinator back to Public Information Officer. It's a little bit more well-known, as you know, throughout law enforcement. So we figured it was a little bit easier.
Much simpler.
Absolutely. It's not so much a mouthful. It fits on a business card, fits on my polo, which is nice. So it all works out.
Nice. Now, are you the only person in your unit, or are there more than one person?
I am the only person in my unit. So I am a one-woman show when it comes to all things public information and media relations for the men and women of the Sarasota Police Department.
Very nice. So, Genevieve, what's your background? How did you get into the field?
That's a great question, Robert. So I've had the privilege and the honor of serving here at the Sarasota Police Department. I just marked 8 years back on May 29th. And so before here, I was what some folks in the industry call a recovering reporter. I was a TV news journalist throughout the country, started behind the scenes as an assignment editor and videographer at the ABC affiliate, actually here in Sarasota. And from here, I moved to West Virginia to get my first on-air job, spent about 1.5 years there. That then took me out west to Idaho. And I spent 4 years as a bureau chief for an ABC affiliate out in Idaho. And then after Idaho, I was able to move back to Florida. I was actually born and raised in Florida. And so I had an opportunity to serve at the CBS affiliate in Fort Myers at Wink News. And then about 2 years after I took that position is when this incredible opportunity opened up. And so I applied, and here we are 8 years later.
Very nice. Idaho, that's quite a difference from Florida.
I have to say it is. I was actually born and raised here in Sarasota. And so having the opportunity to serve and give back to my hometown is pretty incredible. I always thought when the day came or when the opportunity came to make that transition out of TV news, I thought, I want to be a public information officer. I want to serve. I want to give back to a community. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would have an opportunity to do it in my hometown. And ending up in Idaho was a wild story. So growing up in Sarasota, I watched the ABC affiliate here where I had my first TV job. And so I became pretty close with the main anchors at the time that I grew up watching. They hate me saying that, but I grew up watching them. And so one of them in particular, she and I, Heidi Godman, she and I became super good friends. And we've stayed in touch throughout this entire journey of mine. And so one year I came home when I was living in West Virginia, and I took my resume tape to Heidi from the newsroom. And many, recovering TV journalists know you have a resume tape that kind of shows your work. And so I brought it home to show her, and she said, hey, listen, I know a news director in Idaho. Let me email him. And before I could even figure out where exactly Idaho was, I knew it was out west, didn't know exactly how far out west. She had emailed the news director at the ABC affiliate in Pocatello, Idaho. And he said, send my tape. And the next thing I knew, I was flying out to Idaho to check it out because I wasn't super comfortable moving sight unseen all the way out to Idaho. So, right. But I'll tell you what, if you haven't had a chance to visit Idaho, Wyoming, that part of the West, it looks like a postcard. Pictures don't do it justice. It's incredible people live out there. I actually ended up staying for 4 years, which is pretty long in the TV news business. As you know, most reporters do about a 2-3 year contract, and I ended up doing 4. And I wouldn't change it for a thing. And my husband and I go back to visit there quite often because we love it out there.
Very nice. Very nice. So how big is the police department in Sarasota and with the jurisdiction of Sarasota itself?
Sure. So at the Sarasota Police Department, so for those that aren't super familiar with the geography of Florida, Sarasota is about an hour south of the Tampa Bay area. And so the Sarasota Police Department, we have about 175 sworn and give or take about 60 civilians that serve. So not a super small department, but not a giant department like some of your big cities. And so I just, I can't say enough good things about the men and women that serve with me, whether it be civilian or sworn. We're a family here, and it's awesome to work alongside them.
And how big is the jurisdiction itself, the population wise?
Sure. So the city of Sarasota is actually in Sarasota County, which can sometimes be a little confusing for folks. The city of Sarasota has just about, I'd say about approximately 60,000 full-time residents, but we're a big tourist area. And so during the day, a lot of people drive in for work, they're visiting. So we can see folks in the city of Sarasota and upwards of 120,000 people a day. And like I said, the city sits in the county of Sarasota, and Sarasota County has upwards in about 350 to 400,000 folks that live in it.
So you get a lot of people just coming to the beach and
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, we're spring training home to the Baltimore Orioles. We've got beautiful beaches here. Lido Beach is in the city of Sarasota, one of my favorites. I grew up going to that beach. It's my new chief says it all the time. We get to serve and work in paradise, and it really is paradise down here.
Sarasota, along with pretty much all of Florida, entered into hurricane season just recently. Can you give some detail to how you coordinate dealing with the threat of a hurricane? Because I don't think a lot of PIOs that don't live in a hurricane zone understand what that involves.
That's a great question, Robert. So it's funny because shortly after this call, I'll actually be hopping on another Zoom call to talk with Sarasota County area PIOs about the upcoming hurricane season. We're going to hear from the emergency manager for Sarasota County, kind of refreshing our memory as far as, hey, it's hurricane season. And for folks that aren't familiar with hurricane season, it typically runs from June 1st to November 30th. And we see a height of the season usually around August and September. And so as a public information officer, I work with my counterparts at the city of Sarasota. There's a communications manager over there, Jan Thornburg, as well as a communications specialist, Jason Bartolone. And the three of us work together on a city level, but we work with our county partners. Because Sarasota County is so widespread and it is so big, it's good for us to be on the same page, as hurricane season begins. So I'm excited for the Zoom opportunity today. But we work on messaging. We all want to be on the same page. We don't want multiple messages going out to confuse residents, because some folks, they may have lived here their whole lives, or they may have just moved here 6 months ago and never gone through a hurricane. And so as communications professionals, we want to make sure that we are sharing the same message. And so whether that be that I'm sharing a public safety message from the law enforcement aspect, or that the county is sharing something because the county runs our shelters in Sarasota, that we're all sharing that same message. So for instance, if the county's sharing what shelters are open, when they're open, where people can go, we're going to share that on behalf of the county rather than making our own message, because we want it to come from one voice so people aren't confused. Especially in a time of crisis, we need to make sure, and it's imperative that people understand, what's happening, where they can go, what they need to do to have a plan and things like that.
Are you guys using a shared platform to do that so the messaging is all unique or all identical, or is it just you've got pre-formatted stuff that goes out to everybody at one time?
We've actually done both of those things. Countywide, we share a Dropbox that all of us can get different graphics and whatnot. And, the last time we saw a major storm that really it was kind of all hands on deck. We've had hurricanes and tropical storms since then, but really a big major one was Hurricane Irma in 2017. We all changed our cover photos. We changed, if it was relevant, our profile photos. So folks understood that we were all on the same page. If people were sharing information about shelters, we all shared it at once, whether it be a text thread or an email thread, we were in constant communication. Myself and the folks from the city, we were hunkered down here at headquarters, at the Sarasota Police Department headquarters. We have an EOC within here, and then there's an EOC at the county as well, but we're constantly in communication to make sure, hey, what are you planning on sharing? And when are you planning on having a news conference? And what message will, can we help you get out there? Because sometimes people only follow the police department, or they only follow the city of Sarasota, not realizing that there's other ways that they can get messaging, but that's why it's important to make sure that we're all sharing the same message so folks aren't confused.
I agree. So what's the personal impact for you? Because as a PIO, you're kind of stuck 24/7 in that mode during a hurricane.
Exactly. During a hurricane and just in general, as a one woman show for the Sarasota Police Department, I am on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, unless I take that coveted time off that so many of, I know my counterparts in the PIO world enjoy so much, but we don't get a lot of, unfortunately. But, during a hurricane, Hurricane Irma, I just go back to that. My husband was hunkered down with my parents and my grandmother at our house. And they were boarded up. My parents were in a higher evacuation zone along with my grandmother. So we live out east. And so it was a little bit safer for them all to be there. But my husband was dealing with that dynamic back at home while I'm sleeping in my office. And, right across from me in our community room, I've got public works folks that have left their families and are sleeping here at Sarasota Police Department headquarters. And so it was a little crazy. I think I worked for about 3-4 days straight when that storm happened. And it's hard, you get into that second and third day and you're running on very little sleep and you've been sleeping on the floor. But, at the end of the day, I thought, the messages that we're sharing and the information that I'm getting out, people had to evacuate for that storm. And I learned just through people, sending private messages and direct messages or whatnot, that they were so thankful that on a police department platform that we were sharing what our officers were seeing and what they were doing, because people left because they had to, and they wanted to know what's happening to Sarasota, what's happening in my hometown. And so just throughout that storm, in addition to sharing, the important messages that we were sharing countywide, I let people know, like, hey, Sarasota police officers are going through trailer parks and letting folks know through an air horn, they need to evacuate. And this is what we're seeing out on the beaches, whether it be erosion or no erosion, or, if we're seeing flooding or whatnot. And so, that takes a toll after a while. Personally, but you just get through it and you realize that we're all in this together. And that was kind of my mantra during Hurricane Irma in 2017. I just kept sharing that message that we're all in this together. And, I was just constantly checking in with my husband as much as I could, even if it was a quick text like, hey, I'm going to sleep for an hour, or hey, how's everybody hunkered down? Because once my family got to my house, they had to shutter in the front door and just ride out the storm. So, you play that balancing game of that work-life balance that I know a lot of us go through every day.
Thanks for sharing the personal part of it, because that it can be unnerving when you're not sure if your family's going to be safe, and yet you're stuck having to be the responsible, or not the responsible person because your husband being responsible with family, but now you have that professional responsibility that you have to get it out. You're not going to be at home, and that's tough on anybody's relationship. And I think a lot of PIOs don't realize, or I should say, new PIOs coming in don't realize the amount of sacrifice that the professionals that you are and everybody else that deals with these major disasters they have to deal with on a regular basis.
Exactly. And whether, it be a hurricane or it be, the stuff like, just for example, I know that we had some confusion at the beginning of this as far as what time and day this was. And, we had major incidents that happened in the city last night. And I think I'm running on about 4 coffees and 3 hours sleep. But, there are sacrifices when you serve as a public information officer, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I love my job. And to be able to give back to my hometown and serve here is something I never in a million years thought I'd get the opportunity to do. But there is that personal sacrifice, and anybody that wants to serve as a public information officer, I understand there are sacrifices. I carry 2 phones. I'm on call 24/7, and I'm like many other PIOs. It takes a lot for me to completely disconnect, because I'm always like, hey, I want to make sure this is good. I want to make sure we're covered. I want my officers to know that I'm always available for them, whether it be on a personal level or a professional level.
Thank you very much for your service. I really appreciate it, Genevieve. And
absolutely. Thank you for yours.
You're welcome, and thank you. And I'm sure that the people of Sarasota love the fact that you're doing such a great job. So let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about a couple of the programs that you started. I want to talk first about Tweet from the Beat.
That is, I have to say, one of my favorite programs, and I wish that I got to do it more often than I do. Being a one person, I've got to balance, again, going back to that work-life balance. When do I want to give up a Friday night or a Saturday night? Because we all know, working in law enforcement, things seem a little bit more active during the weekends. And so the Tweet from the Beat program I started shortly after I began here at the Sarasota Police Department in 2013. And I have to give a shout out to Captain Dana Costin with the Cape Coral Police Department. Cape Coral is a city that's next to Fort Myers here on the southwest coast of Florida. And when I served as a reporter at Link News in Fort Myers and I worked there, Captain Costin served as the public information officer for the Cape Coral Police Department. And he was really the driving force between creating their incredible PIO program that they have. And one of the programs he started there was Tweet from the Beat. And so when I began as my journey as a public information officer here at Sarasota PD, I reached out to him and I said, hey, do you mind if I steal some of your things? Because I wanted to take what I've learned from some of my favorite PIOs throughout my journey as a reporter and implement them as a PIO, because, I'm sure many PIOs can relate that, when you become a PIO, until you start making those relationships and those networks and you learn about the different associations, whether it be IACP or NIOA or, the different, social media connections that we make, you don't know exactly what to do. And so I just looked back and I thought, what were some of the great things that PIOs did when I worked with them as reporters do at their agencies? And so I reached out to him and I just said, hey, do you mind if I steal this? And he said, absolutely. And, he's no longer the PIO. He's actually a captain now and serving over their professional standards. But I actually have to give credit to him. And so I've implemented that program here. And basically for folks that aren't familiar with it, Tweet from the Beat, some folks call it a tweet along or a ride along, a virtual ride along. I basically ride shotgun with a patrol officer and I just tweet out what they're doing, whether it be, just an easier going night, hey, we're responding to this call, we're responding to that call. But it just gives folks that follow us on social media a chance to interact with myself and with the officer I'm riding with. Typically, I'll start out at the beginning of the shift, either sharing a video or a photo of myself and the officer introducing ourselves. Because I know on social media, we may have gotten a follower 5 minutes ago, or they may have been a follower for 5 years. So I like to introduce ourselves, explain who we are, what we're doing, and then encourage folks to follow us along if they have questions for me, for the officer, and so I'll just ride until, basically I get tired. Sometimes that can be 3 or 4 in the morning, or sometimes, it's a little bit slower night and, I decide to wrap it up at 1 or 2, especially if I'm not seeing that interaction on Twitter. And so it's mainly a Twitter program, if you will. But I do share things on Facebook or Instagram to try to get people back to Twitter. And I say, hey, if you're looking to, get a behind the scenes look or a virtual ride along with our Sarasota police officers, come follow us on Twitter. And this is how you can do it. And I explain that, you can make a free account. And I also promote it by sending out a news release a couple days ahead of time, just to let folks know that, hey, if you're interested in seeing kind of a behind the scenes look at a shift for one of our patrol officers, here's how you can follow along. Here's how you can create an account. And, I will say, looking at analytics, especially for Twitter, it seems to be when our Tweet from the Beat program happens, that's when we see a lot of our followers increase. So it's great to be able to interact with folks.
That was going to be my next question. How was it received? So you saw an increase in followership. That's awesome.
Yeah, we do see an increase in followerships, and some of the questions are a little, not expected, but some of them are just as simple as, how can I become an officer, or what's the background of the officer you're riding with, and tell us your favorite call. And so, we've had some calls that get, or some tweets, I should say, that get a little bit more emotional than others. Within the last couple of years, I rode with a patrol officer, and he actually saved someone from committing suicide. And I, posted that up on Facebook, and I, shared it on Twitter and on Instagram, because I thought it was important for folks to see that this is the stuff you don't always hear about, but our officers do it every day, and officers do it all over the country. Our officer this particular night just had a simple conversation. This person said that they had wanted to end their life by jumping off a bridge that we have here in town. And, our officer was able to respond and talk that person, into the help that they needed to get. And it was moving to be able to see that, and then to be able to share that on all our platforms.
Very nice. So were there any negatives or lessons that you learned from doing the first one that you would like to impart to others?
That's a really great question, actually. And I know we've kind of talked about that, what kind of fallouts or lessons that were learned. So I always go back and forth between that PIO hat and that reporter hat. When I was a reporter here in Florida, we have very broad and very open public records laws. So pretty much anything without it being under investigation is open for folks to learn about here in the state of Florida. And so I had that mentality when I started that Tweet from the Beat, or that tweet along program that we do. And so I would share information, hey, we're responding to 123 Main Street. to, a shooting and whatnot, because I have that background as a journalist. And then I started working with officers, and they actually taught me a couple things. And they said, hey, not for nothing, but when people are following us and you're sharing exactly where we're at, it's kind of an officer safety issue. And I thought, I never even thought about that. I just assumed like it would be okay to explain where people are. So now when I do that tweet along, I'm not real quick to explain where we are right away, because you don't know who's following you, and you don't know who's interacting with you, because it is social media and it is a viral world. And so, I'll just explain, hey, we're responding to, a domestic violence situation, or, hey, we're responding to a traffic crash. If it's something that the officer is comfortable sharing, I'm always in constant contact with them and communication with them to ask them, hey, are you okay with me sharing exactly where it is? And so that is definitely a big lesson that I've learned.
That's a good point. Thank you. So let's talk about, I think, the Tea with the Chief. Is that the other program?
Yeah, we did that once with our former chief. She just felt it was important to be able to connect with folks on a different level. We've also started the Coffee with a Cop program as well. Because of COVID, I know everybody's, different, interactive neighborhood programs are kind of on hold, and we're hoping to ramp that back up. But it was kind of a spinoff of Coffee with a Cop, because folks wanted to be able to talk to the chief, and so our former chief held it at a cafe a couple of years ago, and it was just, during the day around lunchtime, and folks that, were able to break off from work. We had a packed room, actually standing room only. They were able to come down and speak with the chief one-on-one, because sometimes you don't have that access. But, our philosophy, we're very transparent at the Sarasota Police Department, as I know many law enforcement agencies are nationwide. And so that's why it's so important for everybody from, the brand new officer that just got sworn in all the way up to the chief to be able to be accessible to folks. Whether they reach out to us on social media, or we have events like Tea with the Chief or Coffee with a Cop or our National Night Out programs. We want folks to know that we're here to be able to serve them and help them however.
So this gets me to my next question then, jumping into transparency and how it's impacted law enforcement, especially just in the last year, especially post George Floyd and now the trial, the verdict in the trial. How do you think that has impacted law enforcement now? The transparency part of it.
That's a really great question. So kind of going back into what I spoke about earlier about public records laws here in the state of Florida, any journalist or any PIO or anyone who's familiar with Florida public records laws knows that they're extremely open and they're very broad. So getting information in the state of Florida is very easy and accessible to folks, whether they realize it or not. And so we've always had a philosophy of transparency, but that just continues that, because, you can pretty much get just about anything, unless it's considered under investigation, active and ongoing, then it can be redacted. But, that limits as far as what information can be withheld. Recently, I'd say within the last month or two, we've even upped that ante on the transparency at the Sarasota Police Department and in the city of Sarasota. We've implemented a body-worn camera program. Our chief, James Reeser, he calls it a technological journey moving into the future. And so we've already seen how complaints have come in. And once we pull that body camera video, that complainant that, may have complained on an officer or had an issue with a call, when we pull the body camera video, it's like, oh, that's not exactly what happened. And the video shows the exact thing. And I know that body worn camera video doesn't show everything, but it shows a lot more than we were able to see before. And so all our officers have been trained on that on the patrol level. Some of our specialty units have it for, their specific equipment, our SWAT team and whatnot. And so that's just another level of transparency that we're able to share with people. And folks can request that video. Again, under Florida public records laws, folks can request that if they want to see it, if they were involved in a call or whatnot, they're able to do that here.
So is there any complications with the way that you're sharing information out there? You're pretty open and honest about it publicly. Is that the way you're sharing your messaging out to the public, like your press releases and things like that? Are you putting that stuff directly to social and then not sharing it out to the media in a separate email? Or are you just telling them, go to the Facebook page or your Twitter account and there's the media release?
So I will say I'm kind of that old school journalist. I still like the news release idea. And so serving at the Sarasota Police Department, we have very active neighborhoods in the city of Sarasota. And we have neighborhood presidents. And so I actually have an email group just for the neighborhood presidents. that run the neighborhood associations. And so when I'll give you an example for this morning, I had to send out an arrest this morning that we had. And so I posted it on our website. Then I posted it to Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Then I sent out an email, and that email went to all city employees for the city of Sarasota. It went to the entire police department. And then I have all these different residential groups that it also went to as well. And then I posted it on our Nextdoor platform, and I posted it on our website, because I know that, especially in the city of Sarasota, a lot of folks retire and move here, and maybe they only pick up the newspaper, or maybe they only watch the local stations at 6 o'clock and they're not on social media. But then I also know folks like ourselves, or the younger, public information officers or reporters, or just citizens in the county, they may only be on Twitter, or they may only be on Facebook. And whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, I would rather get our message out there front and center on every platform. And I'd rather people see it 8 different times than not see it at all. And it's important to me, especially internally, to share things with our agency, again, whether it's good or bad, so they hear it from us and they read about it from us before they pick up the newspaper or before they see it on the local TV stations.
Awesome. So this is kind of a freestyle question. Just as a curiosity, are you using any kind of any of the monitoring services out there for Sarasota? The ones that actually monitor activity that go on in the community?
As far as like a TVI's program, or?
Correct. Yeah.
I'm actually not. We've looked into that and we've tried to fix it into the budget, and it's still a discussion we're having with the command staff. But I do have Google Alerts set up. I know they're not the greatest, but they, thankfully do work. And I know that we've been in talks with TVI's as well. But, I'm constantly searching, Sarasota Police on Facebook or on Twitter to see if there's something I missed. If we're tagged on something, I go and I read it to make sure I haven't missed something. We've got, as an agency, a great working relationship with our media market here. It's part of the Tampa market. And so sometimes reporters will call me and go, hey, not for nothing, but this is going on, or somebody asked about this. And so, I'm constantly checking, Googling, if there's a officer that's involved in something, I'll Google their name to see what pops up if I miss something. So it's a lot of it's on me, but I don't mind it. Like I said, I love my job, and I'm just so grateful and honored to have this job.
Excellent, Genevieve. Thank you. I appreciate that. So let's lighten it up a little bit. We'll go to some rapid fire questions, make it easy for you.
Absolutely.
So simple question: beer, wine, favorite cocktail, or bourbon?
So I have to say, going into summer right now, it's actually the hard seltzers that everybody is liking so much.
Okay, very good. What animal would be your ideal pet, and why?
I think I would go with a dog. I'm much more of a dog person than I am a cat person. And I think it's just because dogs give you that unconditional love. No matter what happens at the end of the day, when you go home, you could have the worst day or the best day. That dog's going to love you no matter what. And so I would definitely say dog.
Excellent. What advice would you give someone who wants to pursue a career as a PIO?
Great question for this one. I would definitely say it's not for the faint of heart, and that it's rewarding and humbling, but you have to understand there are sacrifices. We talked about it a little bit earlier. A lot of PIOs are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We carry 2 phones. There are important events that sometimes you miss, and that's part of that sacrifice. I'll give you an example. I have a brand new nephew that was just born yesterday. I got a chance to hold him. He was 6 hours old, and within 20 minutes of me going to the hospital, I have him in one hand, I have my phone on the other, and I'm typing with this hand. I understand that that's part of the job. And so that's just going back to those sacrifices, that if you do choose to be a PIO, there are sacrifices that you have to make. But again, it's an extremely rewarding and humbling job getting to serve your community. But I would also say some advice is, if you do choose to be a PIO and you get in that role, get to know your people, everybody from the chief to the deputy chief to the captains and below to the newest officer that was sworn in. I'm a big believer in doing those ride-alongs, sometimes not for a tweak from the beat program, but just to spend time with the officers, because I know some officers may not come into headquarters, but I want to get to know them, because at the end of the day, their stories are the ones that I'm going to be telling. And I want to get to know them on a personal level. Plus, I want them to know that they can trust me, that the story I'm going to tell hopefully is not going to put them in a negative light. And so, but you don't get to know them and build those relationships unless you get to know those people. And so, I would also say, if you choose to be a PIO, get to know your people inside and out as well.
Excellent point. Thank you. Do you have a hidden talent?
I had to think hard and I had to think for many days about this. I even consulted my family, my parents, my husband, my siblings. I was like, guys, I don't have a hidden talent. Like, I don't know what it is. And so my husband and I went to the beach this past weekend, and I was driving back and I thought, my hidden talent, I can drive a stick shift. Not many people can say they drive a stick shift. So my personal car is actually a stick shift. Now it is approaching 20 years old, I will say. But I would say that not a lot of people can drive a stick shift that I know. So I would say that if we're talking about hidden talents, that might be the best thing.
Awesome. What do you do to de-stress?
Great question. I discovered the orange theory last summer, and I would say that has become my new de-stressor. For anybody that does orange theory, kudos, because it is no joke. But if you don't, it's 60 minutes of just kick your butt, rowing, running, and weight room. And it's just a nice way at the end of the day to just kind of let it all go. Another thing I do enjoy to do when I can is to travel with my husband. We like to whether go overseas when a pandemic isn't happening or just travel in our backyard here in Florida.
Excellent. If you could turn back time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell her?
I love this question. Another one that I thought a lot about, but I would say if I could go back and turn back time and talk to my 18-year-old self, I would tell her, give yourself a lot of grace. Life is not a marathon, or not a sprint, rather, it's a marathon. Give yourself patience. And at the end of the day, I promise you, it's all going to work out the way it's supposed to.
Excellent. That's a great way to round it out and move into our final thoughts. So is there anything else you'd like to share?
You know, I just have to sing the praises of anyone who serves as a public information officer or law enforcement for that matter, whether you're sworn or civilian. You know, this is a calling. And so I just appreciate each and every one, whether I've met them or not, for what they do and what they choose to do on a daily basis. Whether you're sworn, civilian, if you just serve, you know, whether it be in law enforcement, EMS, or, you know, just any sort of public service role, it's not for the faint of heart. And thank you for what you do. And definitely remember to take time for yourself.
Great way to put a final thought on it. Thank you very much, Genevieve. So how can people best reach out to you if they want to learn more about what you do, or they want to connect with you?
Sure, absolutely. I am on Twitter. You can just find me under Genevieve at the handle at Genevieve Judge, GENEVIEVE Judge, just like the one on the bench. They can also email me here at Sarasota Police Department, genevieve.judge@sarasotafl.gov.
I will put that in the show notes, and anybody can go back and look at it. Genevieve, thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. When you brought up that you had an interest in and you really liked the show, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get her on the show and put her on the spot. So thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, I've been listening to the podcast for a while, and I've been listening, and, you know, you've interviewed some of my best friends, and I've gotten to learn from folks I haven't had an opportunity to meet. And so you've done a great job with it. So kudos to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity.
And that was Genevieve Judge from the Sarasota Police Department. Thank you for coming on the show, Genevieve. We really enjoyed it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you would like to contact the show, please email us at the piopodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to get notified of the latest episode. If you are listening on a platform that allows reviews, please give us a review. We appreciate any review, good or bad. It helps us improve on each episode. Until next time, be safe.